The text arrived while I was holding a heavy box of printed programs that still smelled like fresh, sharp ink. My thumbs were sore from tying hundreds of tiny silk ribbons, but I didn't mind because I thought this was for all of us. The message was short and cold, flickering on my cracked phone screen. Make sure everything is perfect by 5. Don't be late setting up. I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead and looked around the massive, echoing ballroom. I had spent 3 months of my life making sure every inch of this place looked like a dream. I walked over to the registration desk to drop off the programs, and that is when I saw the guest list spreadsheet lying open. My heart did a strange, heavy thump in my chest. I scanned the W section, looking for my own name, expecting to see it highlighted as a VIP or at least a family member. It wasn't there. I checked the staff tab. Not there either. I refreshed the document, thinking it was a glitch. My name was gone, not misspelled, not moved to another table, but completely deleted. The doors were wide open, the expensive candles were ready to be lit, and my hard work was visible in every single corner of the room, but my place was absolutely nowhere. My name is Tessa Whitford, and I am 29 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have been the oldest daughter, which in my family means being the default organizer. I am the family crisis mechanic. If a sink leaked, I called the plumber. If a birthday was coming up, I bought the gift. If a holiday needed planning, I was the one holding the clipboard. My family viewed my reliability as a natural resource like air or water, something that was always just there, free for the taking. They called me the fixer. But I realized too late that being the fixer meant I was never the guest. My superpower was making sure no one else ever had to worry, but my curse was wearing the same uniform of invisible labor every single day. I had skipped my own freelance work and put my life on hold because I truly believed this investment gala was our family's big moment. I thought we were building a legacy together. I thought ours meant including me. I didn't realize that in their eyes I wasn't a partner or even a daughter. I was just the help that didn't need to be paid. The effort montage of the last 90 days flashed through my mind like a movie I never wanted to watch again. I had booked the venue after calling 12 different locations to find the one that looked the most prestigious. I was the one who negotiated the catering discount, saving the family thousands of dollars on the steak and salmon dinner. When they told me the bank transfer was delayed, I used my own savings to pay the initial deposit so we wouldn't lose the date. I confirmed every speaker, printed every glossy brochure, and spent 12 hours building the seating map so that the most important investors were at the best tables. I stayed up for 3 straight nights, redesigning the program layout, because my mother decided she didn't like the font at the last minute. I even skipped a major freelance contract that would have paid my rent for 2 months just to keep this schedule intact. Every single welcome gift had a hand-tied ribbon because they said machine-made knots looked cheap. My fingerprints were literally on every single physical object in that room, from the napkins to the stage lights. I had poured my blood, sweat, and bank account into a night I wasn't even invited to attend. Looking back, the micro-disrespect signals were everywhere, but I had chosen to ignore them. For weeks, their replies to my long, detailed update emails had been shrinking. I would send a 3-page plan, and my father would reply with a single word: "Cool." When I asked for help choosing the flower arrangements, they told me, "Just handle it." Whenever I tried to explain the logistical problems I was solving, my brother would roll his eyes and say, "Don't overcomplicate things, Tessa." They used a specific kind of weaponized flattery, telling me, "You're just so much better at this than we are," to make sure I kept doing all the work without complaining. The biggest red flag happened 2 weeks ago when I asked about being reimbursed for the venue deposit I had covered. Suddenly, the subject changed to the weather or the guest count. When I asked where I would be sitting so I could print my own place card, they just sent a thumbs-up emoji and never gave me a table number. No one ever said thank you for the 80-hour weeks I was putting in. They only asked if the timeline was being met. I told myself they were just stressed. I was wrong. I stood on the cold concrete of the loading dock and called my younger brother, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hey, quick check. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My name is missing from the final guest sheet. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the muffled sound of a party already starting, the clink of expensive crystal and the hum of rich voices. Then, he laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, which almost made it worse. It was a casual, dismissive chuckle. Oh, yeah, about that, he said. This part of the evening is really just for the investors and the immediate stakeholders. I felt the air leave my lungs. I am immediate family, Leo, I whispered. His voice turned firm, the way you speak to a child. Right, but you aren't positioned family. You're staff tonight, Tessa. We thought you understood that. The music thumped louder behind him, a celebratory song I had chosen for the playlist. He hung up before I could say another word. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They didn't see me as a person. I was just a tool they used to build their stage, and tools don't get to sit at the table. I walked back inside the ballroom one last time, and the visual emptiness of the room felt like a desert. The round tables glowed under the soft amber lights I had spent hours positioning. The centerpieces I had assembled by hand stood like floral chandeliers, smelling of lilies and betrayal. The place cards curved in perfect, mocking rows, hundreds of names, but none of them mine. Up on the giant stage screen, the slide deck I had built at 2:14 a.m. 3 weeks ago looped over and over, showing our family's success. My gift bags sat at every single chair like obedient little soldiers, waiting to be taken home by people who didn't even know I existed. It was a masterpiece of planning and execution, a perfect machine that I had built from nothing. The only thing missing from the entire beautiful, expensive scene was me. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by my own hard work, and felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had built a palace for people who wanted me to stay in the kitchen. The silence of the empty room before the guests arrived was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I didn't cry. I didn't scream, and I didn't go running into the back room to demand an apology. Instead, a strange and heavy stillness settled over me. It was like something inside me finally closed a door and turned the lock very quietly. I wasn't even angry anymore. Anger is hot and messy. What I felt was cold and clinical. I started doing a mental inventory. I thought about every contract I had signed, every "can you just handle it" email I had saved, and every dollar I had spent that hadn't been paid back. I realized that for months, they had treated me like an employee, but they had forgotten the most important rule of business. You have to follow the contract. They wanted me to be staff? Fine. I would be the most professional staff member they had ever encountered. I walked back to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement with a new, sharp rhythm. I opened my laptop and pulled up my project folder. I wasn't looking for family photos or memories. I was looking for the paper trail they had been too lazy to create themselves. The fixer was done fixing their problems for free. I sat in the front seat of my car and began my strategic response. I opened the master folder containing every email approval, every change request, and every voice note where my father told me to just sign whatever is needed. Then, I found the golden ticket. Because my family was too busy to handle the boring paperwork, the master vendor contract listed me, Tessa Whitford, as the primary client and the sole financial guarantor. They had never completed the ownership transfer form because they didn't want to deal with the administration. Legally and technically, the entire event answered to my signature and mine alone. I had the power to shut the whole thing down with one phone call. But I didn't do that. I didn't want to be destructive. I wanted to be accurate. I stayed in my car and systematically called each major vendor: the caterer, the lighting crew, the security team, and the tech support. I didn't cancel the service. I simply corrected the billing contact and the on-site authority name to the only person legally responsible for the bill: myself. I told them that no changes or releases could happen without my direct, personal approval. At 4:10 p.m., the social consequence ripple began. From my car, I watched through the glass windows as the vendors started approaching my father and brother. The catering manager stopped the servers from bringing out the appetizers because he needed an authorization code they didn't have. The tech lead refused to start the opening video because the release signature on the file wasn't theirs. My father was waving his arms, looking red-faced and confused, but the vendors just shook their heads. "I'm sorry, we need Tessa's go-ahead for that," I could almost hear them saying. Suddenly, my phone lit up like a frantic switchboard. First came the "where are you" texts, then the "call me" demands. When I didn't answer, they turned to urgent, and finally, stop being dramatic. They were panicking because the invisible engine that ran their lives had suddenly stopped. I waited until the very last minute, then I replied with a single, polite line. "Happy to help. Please add me to the attendee list, as originally promised." I didn't use any threats or drama. I just treated it like a standard business procedure. I wasn't asking as a daughter anymore. I was negotiating as the person who held the keys. They realized they were trapped. Within 2 minutes, my name was added to the guest list, but they couldn't help themselves from taking one last jab. They labeled my badge Operation Support instead of Guest. It was a small, pathetic move. I approved the vendors anyway and walked into the room. As I stood near the back, I noticed something else on the big screen. My slide deck, the one I had built from scratch, had been edited. My name had been scrubbed from the created by credits, and my brother's and father's names had been inserted instead. They were literally trying to steal my intellectual labor in front of 200 people. Fortunately for me, I know how version history works, and I know that ghosts always leave a trail in the metadata. From my phone, I remotely accessed the master file on the cloud. I restored the original credit metadata, and with a quiet click, I locked the presentation file so it couldn't be changed again. The digital truth was sealed. I felt a strange sense of peace as I watched the guests take their seats. The trap was set, and they had walked into it themselves by being greedy. The opening speech began, and my father stood on the stage, looking every bit the successful patriarch. He started bragging to the crowd about the months of personal planning and dedication he and my brother had put into this event. He talked about family values and hard work. Right on cue, the presentation behind him transitioned to the next slide. Because I had restored the metadata, the screen automatically displayed the file attribution in large, clear letters at the bottom of the slide. Created by Tessa Whitford. Edited by Tessa Whitford. Maintained by Tessa Whitford. The words were impossible to miss. My father froze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open as he stared at the screen. A murmur ran through the crowd of investors. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my brother, who was sitting in the front row. "Why would you do that?" I didn't even look at him. I just typed back the only 4 words that mattered. I kept the receipts. The catchphrase felt like a gavel hitting a wooden block in a quiet courtroom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't protecting them from their own mistakes. I was letting the world see exactly who did the work. During the intermission, the fallout began to twist in a way I hadn't expected. An older man, a lead investor I had recognized from the seating chart, approached me near the refreshments. He had been watching the stage with a very sharp, calculating look. "You're Tessa?" he asked, glancing at my operations support badge and then back at the screen. I nodded. "I saw the vendor threads that were forwarded for the final approvals," he said, holding up his own phone. "They all seem to think you're the only one who knows what's going on here. Did you handle all the logistics alone?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes." He looked over at my father and brother, who were busy trying to laugh off the glitch to a group of guests. "Who leads the actual execution in your family company?" the investor asked. I smiled, and it was a genuine, tired smile. "Apparently not the people on stage," I replied. He didn't laugh. He just handed me his business card and asked me to meet him on Monday morning to discuss a different project. I thought my story was ending with a small act of revenge, but it was actually just changing owners. 2 weeks later, the peak of the downfall hit the Whitford family business. It turned out that the invisible labor I did was the only thing holding their reputation together. 3 of the major vendors I had worked with for years officially refused to take any future bookings from my father or brother without my direct involvement. They had seen how I was treated and decided they didn't want to work with people who exploited their own blood. Even worse for them, the investor group delayed the next round of funding. They cited operational restructuring as the reason. But we all knew it was because they realized the company's leadership was a hollow shell. My family called emergency meetings, meetings that, for once, I was not invited to run. Finally, my father called me, his voice sounding small and desperate. He didn't apologize for deleting my name or for lying on stage. He just asked if I could step back in temporarily to fix the mess with the investors. Temporarily is one of those hallway words that never actually reaches a door, it just keeps you walking forever. I didn't even hesitate. I simply said no and hung up the phone. I accepted the investors' meeting instead of going back to the family house. Within a month, they helped me fund my own independent event operations firm. I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I just used the same systems, the same checklists, and the same discipline I had designed for my family. This time, however, the contracts were better, and the credit was mine. My first client list didn't come from expensive ads. It came from referrals who wrote things like, "We want the person who actually did the work." For the first time in my entire adult life, my calendar didn't orbit the whims and crises of my family. It orbited my own standards and my own worth. I was no longer the mechanic fixing other people's broken dreams. I was the architect of my own. The transition was scary, but the air was much thinner and clearer outside of their shadow. I realized that the reliability they had used against me was actually my greatest asset. I just had to stop giving it away for free to people who didn't value it. My name was finally on the guest list of my own life. 6 months later, I sat by my apartment window on a Tuesday morning. The light was turning my coffee into a swirling pool of liquid bronze. It was quiet, and for once, I wasn't waking up to 10 panicked missed calls from my brother. My new assistant, a bright woman who I actually pay a fair wage, asked me who taught me so much about project discipline. I looked out at the city and answered truthfully, "Experience, very expensive experience." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from home, a group text asking if I was available to help coordinate something small for the upcoming holidays. They still didn't get it. They still thought my time was a gift they were entitled to unwrap. I didn't feel angry as I looked at the screen. I just felt finished. I typed out my final line and hit send. "I'm very busy." I put the phone face down on the table and took a sip of my coffee. Have you ever discovered you were the engine, not the passenger? What would you have done if you found out your place was nowhere in the home you built?